Scott. So we are back again talking about Revelation. We are in chapter 18, correct, this Sunday? Mm-hmm. All right. Why don't you give us a little bit of an overview of what your sermon was about this past Sunday?
Yeah, chapter 18 is really a follow-up to what we talked about in chapter 17. It's the fall of Babylon the Great. Mm-hmm. Babylon is really, in Jewish thought and culture in the biblical world, is a code word for evil empire. Mm-hmm. So we've connected it back to the first century Roman Empire. That's the setting. They were the power brokers, the one in charge, the one ruling over really the world of the Bible during the first century. Mm-hmm. And they were evil. Mm-hmm. And so ultimately, chapters 17 tells us that Babylon is going to fall. They're going to be judged because of their evil. Then we're warned in the beginning of chapter 18 that God's people need to come out of Babylon, and the context is telling us to not be participating in their sins. Mm. And then we get to the middle part of chapter 18, which is what we talked about yesterday in the sermon, and that was really focusing in on Babylon's sin of just excessive wealth, mm-hmm. this luxurious lifestyle that they were achieving basically at the expense of others. Mm. It was all fueled by this insatiable greed. So it's talking about economic sins and greed and wealth at the expense of others, and so that's really where our focus was yesterday. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I really enjoyed yesterday's sermon and the text because it kind of gets to this idea that I know I don't think about often, that there's our personal sins that we have to deal with the consequences of things that we do that impact us negatively. And then there's kind of like interpersonal sins where like someone directly sins against me and I experience harm. But there's also almost these like cultural sins or these habits that a culture can fall into that produce sinful consequences. Yeah. And talking about Babylon and their economic practices kind of made me think of that this was just kind of the status quo of the nation, that we desire goods, services, trade, and we are going to get that which we desire at the cost of the livelihood or the dignity of other people like workers and producers and things like that. Right. And that got us into this conversation about a concept today we call fair trade. Mm-hmm. So I was just wondering if you could maybe explain what fair trade is and kind of why it's important that we are aware of that concept at least.
Yeah, and I think based on the context, why it came up in this passage is that, the Revelation 18 tells us, the Word of God tells us that it's not just Babylon that's going to fall, the evil empire, which would have been, the leadership and so forth, but it was all those who helped her, that participated in her economic malpractice, if we want to call it that. All of those that helped, including, the kings that allied with her, the business people, the merchants, and then even the suppliers and the transporters, the mariners. It was the sea captains, and all were complicit. Mm. And essentially, the text is telling us they too will be judged for participating in really this whole issue of economic malpractice and defrauding people, not treating them with a proper dignity, essentially robbing them of what they deserve in order to fuel your profit, your personal wealth, luxurious lifestyles, and to feed this insatiable greed that was behind it all. So that just tells us right there, this is a biblical principle. It's not the first time we've seen it. Mm-hmm. It's all the way through the Bible that God cares deeply about fairness and about treating people, especially the way we handle money and respond to wealth. And so I think that's why this whole issue of fair trade is really important. I think an important just biblical principle that shows us the heart of God, the values of God that we need to be modeling and living out. And you're right. It's something we don't often think about. I think it's all one of those kind of hidden issues or blind spots, if you will, because, in our culture, we're typically, we shop for the best deals and we enjoy the products that we buy, and we don't even think about, hey, how did this impact others down the supply chain, so to speak.
Yeah.
So fair trade makes us start thinking deeper about those things, and it adds a whole nother layer of responsibility.
Yeah, I think it's a byproduct of, just the consumeristic society we live in, that we are taught to value, what's the cheapest I can get this, what's the best deal I can get, and then the human nature of where I want as much stuff as possible. You know what I mean? I want as many things as I can have. And we're just so far physically, consciously removed from the production of the many things we consume or enjoy. Yeah. I mean, you see that in with textiles and clothing, the majority of the clothing we buy comes from other countries, overseas. Very few products are made locally, nationally in America, but especially even within our region or our state. I feel like it's less and less common to buy goods that are made where you live. So we're moved from it that way. And then you even think with our food as well, the people who grow the food we eat, grow the crops we eat, or raise the animals that we consume. We've just kind of been removed from the people who produce the goods, and we kind of just have this assumption, these things just kind of show up in the Walmart or the Kroger, without much thought of how did they get here? Did the people who produce these goods, are they getting a living wage? And when you start thinking about it, it really kind of unravels a lot of things. For me anyway, it's, going back to this idea of benefiting from unfair labor, which the scripture says the people who benefited from Babylon's practices are also found guilty there. So it's am I and my money supporting industries or producers that are not treating their workers or their farmers with a living wage or with dignity, I guess is really what it comes down to.
Yeah. No, I think that's very much in line with the issue. One of our kind of the sermon points was, God is concerned with not only what we do, but with also this, what we condone, what we benefit from, and what or who we cooperate with. And so it just makes us kind of go to that next level of, okay, do I have a responsibility if I'm, benefiting from something that might not really be righteous or fair?
Yeah.
And it's not an easy, I don't think it's an easy process even to discern.
Oh, yeah.
What's fair and what's not, and what's happening in that supply chain, if you will. But there's a reason why we're buying our clothes from other countries. It's because they'll make them cheaper than we will. I mean, our people, so that's why we have this, and that doesn't mean that's business. I understand that. We have to. We want to get. Companies are trying to make money and make sure they can sell their products at a price that the consumer will buy them. And so I do think there is this issue of, okay, what's going to be really fair for the people that are going to help us make our products.
Yeah.
And so there's a lot of ethical decisions that come along that. And I don't think it's always going to be easy to discern, but I think it is something we need to start asking ourselves personally.
Yeah.
Just like I mentioned in the sermon, I love my coffee and the brand of coffee that I love to drink, and I love my chocolates.
Yeah.
And those are two issues two industries that are often kind of labeled as having a lot of issues with unfair trade.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. There's a lot of exploitation of workers and farmers in those industries. I think it's worth just naming that, like, when you dive into this, it can feel overwhelming, right? Because you feel like, man, I want to support people who are doing this the right way, support people who are care about every worker along the supply chain. And you quickly realize, one, it can be hard to find out what companies are doing a good job at that. Because, the companies that are paying unlivable wages to their workers don't really advertise that, right? You're not going to find that on their website. Right. So it can be hard to find it. And then when you really dive into it, you realize how widespread the issue of fair trade is and how few companies actually are really devoted to caring for those who supply the goods or the materials for them to make the products, and then the factory workers who make the products. It's a whole. Right. This could easily snowball into 100 different conversations, but I think it's something to be aware of for sure. And I think there are ways that people who do want to be more conscientious of this can find information. There are resources online, and I'll link to some of these resources in the description for this video and this podcast. But there's one website where you can go online and say, I want to buy coffee, for example, and you can filter by the different categories they have, and they'll give you a list of like 10 different coffee companies that meet really good standards for workers and things like that. So that's a good resource for anyone who's like, I want to buy this type of product, but I want to ensure my money is going towards people who are treating their workers fairly. Yeah. So that's a great resource. I think just the more you dive into it, there are a bunch of different watchdog organizations that will give ratings to companies. Actually, I thought this would be interesting because I sent you an email with some information about this as you were planning your sermon. And in that, I included a few different resources that I want to pull up. One of them was from... let me see who it's from. So the Ethical Consumer. So this is the website that you can go to and search by category and figure out who's doing things ethically. But I thought it'd be fun to talk about the top 5 companies that have the lowest ethical ratings according to this website, because I think this is kind of eye-opening. So they rate on 0 to 100, 100 being like highly ethical, 0 being like not ethical at all in their business practices. So these are some of the top 5 they had as examples of companies that you may engage with often and what their ethical practices are. So the one they mention is Amazon, which I would say is a company that we all engage with, on a huge basis. And according to the Ethical Consumer company, they have a rating of an 8 out of 100 in regards to their practices. And then you get like Nestle, which does chocolate, does water, is a big conglomerate, and they have a 0 out of 100 by their rating. And then the last big one I'll do is Coca-Cola, which you think of all the products that Coca-Cola makes, and they have a 3 out of 100 with their business practices. So I read that and I'm like, oh man, this is a big issue that like, it's not small companies here or there that are not practicing fair trade or seemingly not prioritizing this. It's pretty big companies. So you realize then, okay, say I want to get really serious about this, then man, what does it look like for me to cut Amazon out of everything I do? And you realize how enmeshed Amazon has become into our daily lives. Like how often are we like, oh, I need this by tomorrow, I'll order it off Amazon. Or like, I do audiobooks all the time, and Audible is an Amazon company. So you realize how hard it can really be to navigate the culture we live in if you really want to make this a priority. Yeah.
I see there's some just in those lists you've mentioned that there'd be some tough choices. For somebody that wants to really, I think it's, I don't know, maybe it's just me, but I think a lot of us even are somewhat skeptical a little bit of even the companies, is there the watchdog companies and how trustworthy are they? It was interesting. I did look on the Amazon, the Starbucks packaging. That was my coffee of choice. And it does have a label about an ethical sourcing conservation that they're part of. It's one of those groups. Well, I don't know anything about that group. And I think because coffee is kind of one of those industries that's now kind of come under the spotlight, then all the big companies obviously have to address this. Because they're getting either good PR or bad PR. And so I have suspicion that some of the bigger companies might be forming their own watchdog labels, then saying, hey, we have this standard. So I think you have to go even beyond the face value and really see. And so it takes time, it takes energy, it takes some expertise a little bit, it takes some thinking to see why are these companies getting these ratings and others are getting these ratings, and do we trust those?
And I think what all this highlights is that the first big step is just awareness of this is a issue to be mindful of. There are organizations out there that try to give rubrics for what is doing a good job with this versus what is not. And with everything, you want to do your research and really dive into that. So I think with most issues, the first big step is awareness. I don't want anyone to feel overwhelmed or terrible because suddenly half of their pantry is full of things that are, not fair trade. But just begin to ask those questions, I think, is a great space to begin. And maybe what is one product where I can be more intentional about trying to buy fair trade? And it's slowly easing into it instead of being I got to throw out my whole pantry now and throw away all my clothes at this point, So I think awareness is a big and important first step for people who are not familiar with this conversation.
And I think that's what part of the application of the sermon, I hope would be, is that let's become aware, maybe of how we might be condoning something that's against God's values. And if that's the case, then we need to be willing to make some changes, and we have to find out, do the deep dive, and I think your advice is very appropriate. Let's take it slowly. Don't get overwhelmed. We're not, this is not something that I think is a quick fix. I do think it is something that we all need to be intentional about. And, the more I become informed, I know for me, my expectation of myself is that even if companies that maybe my coffee company is doing doing fairly well in this area. But there's another coffee company that's doing extraordinary well. Maybe I want to just support that. And be willing to say, okay, let me see if I can tolerate their coffee. And probably find some other really good coffees that are in that higher category that are more in line with the biblical values that I want to live by.
No, absolutely. And I think a few ways to tiptoe into the water of trying to make sure the products you're buying and the goods you're consuming are ethically made. A good way you can be aware of that is, buying locally is great. Buying from local coffee roasters here in Little Rock, Fidel & Co. They roast their own coffee and they source their own beans, and they take effort to do that ethically. In Arkansas, Onyx Coffee is a great company that considers these things in their process, because I think when you're closer in proximity to the people producing the product, you can kind of know that they're doing things more ethically, or you maybe even know the people producing those things. Or like with clothing, I know it's kind of a joke with me at this point, but I shop at Goodwill a lot, and buy things like secondhand. So you're not contributing again to big companies or industries that may be predatory in their practices, but you're just buying products that are already out there, clothes that are already out there. So there are ways to tiptoe into the water, and I think, again, awareness is important, and just shopping locally is good anyway because it boosts the economy of your city or your town or your state. So I think it's a great way to begin doing that. You mentioned something interesting that did not cross my mind at all because I am not naturally a sports person. But one of your points on Sunday was not treating people as commodities. And you kind of gave an example of college sports and how there's kind of been this trend of looking at athletes as commodities just for different, college athletic programs or teams. Can you kind of unpack that and what you see there that made that come to mind for you?
Yeah, and it may just be me, but I, the whole college football industry has it's tremendous amount of money is now involved in this. And you have players now being paid with NIL. And so they're all kind of this whole system of mass amounts of money going in from boosters to athletic programs. And then you have this whole NIL where players are being paid different amounts based on the service that we expect them to provide. I don't know. To me, the whole system just seems very unhealthy. And, I just can't help but think, what does God think about all this? All this money on on something pretty trivial, really, sports. And then kind of the greed that seems to be behind it by schools, boosters, and athletes. And the fact that I think the collegiate athletes are just missing out on the best things that I got to experience. In my day, if you got a college scholarship to play a sport, that was a huge blessing. And you got a free education or partially free, whatever the level of scholarship. And the education was the value. But then you also stayed, 4 years. You built close friendships, bonds. You were under a culture through your sport, your team, where values were imparted to you. And just to me, the whole new way college, especially college football, is happening, I think so much of that is being lost. And I think part of it's because it's business transactions, and these are just commodities. Even the players are just commodities. And it, what happens? How do we treat players that maybe underperform or get hurt? Are they just discarded? That's what we do with commodities, but it's not really what we should be doing with people. I may have overreached on that one.
No, I mean,
but that's just some of the thoughts that I think that may be another kind of, to me, maybe a little bit of a blind spot. With our culture. I love sports. I love college. I'm not saying, hey, I'm not going to support it. By being a fan. I'm still going to be a fan, but I care enough about it to want it to be better. And I do think maybe the voice of the fans that are pointing out maybe some of these inequities or just ideologies, challenging them might change it in the future.
I think that's fair observation. And I think you make a good point. And that this is something that I feel like is lost in our conversations today, just culturally speaking, that you can love something and still have criticisms of that thing you love. I feel like I see a lot of discourse, and it's like, well, if you love or support X, Y, or Z, you can't have any criticisms of it. When in reality, if you care about something, an organization, a group of people, whatever it may be, you want it to be the best that it can be. And that comes with criticism and feedback and growth, So I think it's fair to say, hey, are people being treated with God honor, dignity, and this thing I enjoy, because I would like them to be treated that way. Right. You know what I mean? And it's so interesting because I can just hear like people saying in my head, like, well, it's a business and businesses are about the bottom line and you shouldn't care about anything about, their output or this or that. But that does like take an entire person and dwindle them down to a product. And like, are they producing on the scale that you desire? Right. And I guess it kind of transitions somewhat to this other question, because we've been talking about from the consumer end, but as like Christian employers or managers, how can we ensure someone who's watching this maybe owns a company and they're a Christian, how can they ensure that they're treating their employees not as just commodities or means to make money, but as actual like image bearers of God and people with dignity?
Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah. I think that's a huge point, because we need to model this for companies, for business owners, and for our people with the products they buy. Yeah. So I think it's a great thing. I think this whole idea of dignity. I think we as Christian leaders, churches, my responsibility as an overseer of our staff is to respect all of our staff. One of the ways I think we need to do that is, really learn who they are and what their giftings are, what their passions are. And these are all God-given, these talents, these gifts, their experience needs to be harnessed for the kingdom. And so learning that and then trying to turn them loose to be able to serve and do what they do best and what they're kind of made to do, and let them get a lot of joy in using those God-given gifts and talents and personalities and experiences for the kingdom. And then we all benefit from that. So I think it's just a matter of, one, respecting people. I know in Christian leadership, we're taught that we're to be servant leaders. So serving the staff, and then teaching the staff to serve the church and serve each other. I think that's different, perhaps, than what you see in a lot of the world. But we need to model that. I think paying fairly. The church is pretty careful just about this whole issue of equity within the staffing and the salary structures, and trying to stay on top of that to make sure it's fair, and then using resources to help us discern what's fair. Fair benefits, just doing everything we can. And really the idea is to go above and beyond. What can we do to go above and beyond to where our church is a place people want to come and work and stay? And a lot of that is the culture of carrying the culture of respect that comes from the leaders that are imparting that culture. Yeah,
and I think those are things that can happen even outside of a church context. Like just if you run an accounting firm, or if you own this business or that business, like, ensuring that your people are respected in the way that you interact with them, not thinking of them as like lesser than you, or doing your best to, pay a living wage and these things, that God calls us to exemplify Christ in everything we do, and that means how we run a business. One example that comes to mind, the employer that Anna, my wife, works for, they do, I think it's once a month, they give them a Sabbath on a Wednesday. And they're not even explicitly like a Christian organization, but the CEO is a believer. And they just basically, hey, once a month on a Wednesday, people will get the day off. But it's for a Sabbath, a day of like rest and to do something they enjoy, to reconnect with family or with nature, whatever it may be. And I think that's a cool example that I've seen multiple companies doing where like we recognize the importance of resting from the work that you're doing. So we want to give ample time off or encourage time off. It's funny. So not to just keep talking about my wife, but she is in school right now at the law school here in Little Rock. And one of her responsibilities is to kind of help newer law students kind of acclimate to law school and just the pressures and the stress and deadlines and all that. And, part of that is like teaching them, assignments matter, deadlines matter, these things matter, but also kind of making sure they don't go crazy in the process. So there's been one person that she's been working with who's been very stressed about all of this. And so my wife was like, all right, new assignment. Once a week, I want you to have a day where you do not do any law school, like where you spend time with friends or you go on a hike or do something like that. And it's been cool to see, talking to her, that person reporting back just about how beneficial that has been. Just having someone over them, encouraging them to rest and to find margin. And in a world that's full of hustle and bustle and work is about grinding it out to make the money, man, what a blessing would it be to be a manager or a boss, just encourage your employees to truly enjoy their time off and to rest, So I think those are even ways that employers can exemplify Christ and how they manage the people that they oversee.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think that's part of our job, you know, in whatever field, profession, occupation, certainly when we have leadership opportunities, we are followers of Christ.
Yeah.
And so he's the one that sets the pace, tells us our values, and then empowers us to do that. So absolutely, I think Christian leaders out in the workplace should be leading very differently than probably the business model or the world standards.
Yeah. What comes to mind right now in this conversation is the book A Christmas Carol and Ebenezer Scrooge, because that whole story starts off like he's very miserly and he doesn't want to spend any of his money even to like heat his own house, and he makes his employees work like on Christmas Day and all this stuff, and then he has the three ghosts visit, and it ends with him like kind of understanding, it's not all about money and wealth. It's about loving your neighbor and caring for people. And, there's more valuable things than money and greed. Yeah. That just comes to mind as we're talking about, I guess, economic practices that value money over people. So that's an assignment for everyone. Read A Christmas Carol, or at least watch one of the movies. I'll try to read that and then watch A Muppet Christmas Carol every December. I think that's the best movie version of the Christmas Carol story is the Muppet Christmas Carol. Yeah. Yes. Yeah. So that comes to mind. So I think there's a lot to chew on here, a lot to just to begin to think about for people, again, not something that you're going to fully understand every aspect of easily, not something that you can just like flip a switch and suddenly you're not contributing to industries that don't have unethical practices. But I think just beginning to gain an awareness and then to reflect on how do I embody Christ with economics and in the workplace and things like that. Yeah.
I agree. Yeah. I do think we need to become more aware. This is what, there's sins of commission, which are sins that we directly disobey something God's told us not to do, and we do it. That's a sin of commission. But sins of omission are sins when we don't do things that we should be doing. And sometimes there are even things that we just don't even think about, like this area. I think a lot of us have never really even thought much about are my companies that I'm buying from treating their, showing fair trade to all of the supply line that's coming down the road, or to their people. We might think about their direct employees. Yeah. But we never even think beyond that. And is there a responsibility that we have to ask them to do that? Yeah. And I think that the answer to that from the scriptures is yes. And we just have to start thinking about it, be aware of it, and then kind of slowly take steps to learn and grow. And and I think it's also one thing that I hope will start happening is if the Coca-Cola lovers of the world will start advocating with Coke. I mean, I know as a leader, if you start getting, a movement of people saying, hey, we love your product, but we don't love this that we hear about your company. They'll change. That's the market.
That's the double-edged sword of the market, right? Like the dollar has all the power, right? And if you say we're not going to buy this product from this company for this reason, and you get enough people to do that, the company will have to eventually address that. I remember there was a news story recently. Target got into some hot water for some policy changes they made, and there was a large movement that came actually from a pastor in a local church that grew this movement amongst churches that were boycotting Target. And this really spread to a national movement until it got to the point that Target actually fired their CEO and hired a new CEO. And I think they're rolling back some of those changes that people didn't like. So you see that, if it's something you're passionate about, if it's something that you feel like, man, God has given me a passion to care for this issue or the representation of these people in this industry, like don't think changes can't happen, I guess, because there's power in movements like that.
Absolutely.
Well, Scott, this has ended up being a much more practical sermon, I think, this Sunday than I was anticipating, talking about Babylon and her judgment. But it's there in the text. It's all, that whole passage is about trade and unfair trade. So I think I'm glad we dove into this conversation. What are we going to be looking at this coming week in Revelation?
Well, actually, we're going to take a break.
Oh, yes.
This is Gratitude Sunday coming up. And then even after that, we go into Advent. So there'll be a little season of where we're focusing on other things. Give folks a little break from Revelation. But when we pick it back up, we're going to some of the most exciting and hope-filled passages in all of the Bible come at the end of Revelation, which is we're going to look at the bride of Christ in the next chapter. The wedding of the Lamb. Some really pretty awesome passages with that really talk about the hope of that we have in Christ through the victory of Christ. There's a reason Revelation is the last book in our Bible. I mean, it is a triumphant conclusion to the story of the Bible. And so you don't want to miss this last part. Yeah, absolutely. And I'm happy we got our conversation in on fair trade before everybody did all their Christmas shopping. That way they can just, have that in the back of their heads the whole time they're buying things for Christmas. But good stuff coming up. Gratitude Sunday. I'll say this here for anyone who listens, different schedule this Sunday, 9 a.m. combined worship service, which I love doing the combined worship services. It's so special to have our whole church family together in one gathering. And then following that, at 10:30 is the packing party for Operation Christmas Child. And then what everyone's looking forward to is the big lunch we get to all have together afterwards. It's a lot of fun. It's great food, great fellowship, meaningful service project. And just one note, I think most of the Sunday school classes know this, but if you want to meet in your Bible study, you can still meet during that hour, but we will be packing the shoe boxes that time too. And then after that, we're diving straight into Advent with Hope and Peace, which I'll be preaching those two sermons because you'll be in Peru at that time. And then we got our all worship services after that, and then last Sunday of Advent, and man, Christmas is going to be here before you know it. It's crazy. It's crazy. I feel like after you hit Halloween, and then it's just like a snowball through the end of the year after that point. It seems to be faster than ever this year. So it's coming. But it's all good. It is. Well, I'm looking forward to it, Scott, and thank you for sitting down with us today. Absolutely. Thank you.